So when is the rapture of the church? What's the timing of God taking His church out of the world before His terrible day of wrath is finally released? You see, this is a question that's been heavily and hotly debated for many hundreds of years. Since the release of my newest book, Final Warning, Understanding the Trumpet Days of Revelation, I'm continually being asked several important eschatological questions, or questions involving the timing of certain end-time events. Questions like, well, do the trumpets of Revelation come before the rapture of the church or after the rapture of the church? And then another question that's asked, do you believe the church will be raptured before the period of Great Tribulation or sometime in the middle of it or even after the period of Great Tribulation? When I'm asked where I stand on the issues of eschatology, I begin by declaring a few basic truths. Truth number one, first and foremost, our salvation is not based on pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib eschatology. Our salvation is based on Jesus' finished work on the cross, His shed blood, His resurrection from the dead, and our belief in His literal return to establish His kingdom. It's important to search out the biblical truths about the last day events, for sure, but it is not a matter of ultimate importance to our faith. Our salvation in Jesus is that matter of ultimate importance. And secondly, I tell people, listen, my understanding of the order of last days events comes straight from the mouth of Jesus Himself. I've said this many times, but let me quickly say it again here. In Luke chapter 17, Jesus gave two definitive examples of the last days eschatological order of events. He gave the example of Noah's day and Lot's day, and then Jesus declared about them both. Regarding His coming, He said, it will be just like this at the coming of the Son of Man. It will be just like this. So how was Noah's day and Lot's day in regard to the timing of the major eschatology events of the rapture and the time of great tribulation and the ultimate pouring out of God's wrath? Well, they're exactly the same in Noah's day and in Lot's day. Noah lived in the midst of great tribulation. He lived in it and through it. In fact, it was so great that God ultimately destroyed the entire earth for its wickedness. Yet Noah was left in the middle of that great tribulation to be a witness upon that wicked world that God's wrath was indeed on its way. Yet Noah and his family were protected in the midst of the tribulation up until the day he entered the ark. Safely inside the ark, God's wrath was then poured out. Every living thing was destroyed that was left on the earth. Yet Noah and his family were raptured out of God's wrath, if you will. They were lifted up and over the wrath of God in the ark. Peter makes this very same point in the book of 2 Peter. The very same pattern is seen in Lot's day. Lot and his family were living in the midst of great tribulation in the civilization of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was evil, it was wicked, it was perverse. Yet Lot and his family were protected in the midst of that great tribulation until the day that angels came, sent by God, and took them out, raptured them out, if you would, right before God's wrath was poured out and Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. The order is unmistakable in both instances of what Jesus declared as examples of how it will be in the last day. God's people were in the midst of great tribulation, yet protected. Then the rapture or the taking out occurs. Then God's wrath is poured out. Now, people, that is what Jesus said, not me. Jesus said it. He said it will be just like this. So not surprisingly, that's where I stand. And I'm going to go with what Jesus said. I know it's not necessarily the most popular, but neither was Jesus the most popular in His day. Matter of fact, neither was Paul or any of the disciples or any of the prophets before them. But they stood with what God said, and they were right. Now, if this indeed is the order of last days events, and since Jesus said it was, then it is the order, then necessarily the first 6 trumpets of Revelation occur before the rapture of God's people, and the 7th trumpet is the rapture of God's people, the church. The 7th trumpet is blown just before God pours out His final wrath upon the earth. The 7 bowls of wrath found in the book of Revelation. The 7th trumpet is the rapture of the church. As a matter of fact, the 7th trumpet of Revelation found in chapter 11 of Revelation is not only the last trumpet of that series of 7 trumpets, it's the last trumpet mentioned in Revelation. And therefore, it's the very last trumpet in the entirety of the Bible. Now, that's interesting because John said in Revelation 10:7, "But in the days when the 7th angel is about to sound his trumpet, the mystery of God will be accomplished, And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:51 and 52, "Behold, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet." So let's see this again. Jesus said, it will be just like Noah and Lot in regard to the order of events. And the events in both cases were laid out identically. God's people were living in tribulation. God's rapture comes. God's wrath is poured out. Jesus said it'll be just like this. And the book of Revelation says that the 7 trumpets all come before God pours out his wrath. And Paul says the rapture occurs at the very last trumpet. And John says at the very last trumpet the mystery of God is revealed. And the very last trumpet in the entirety of the Bible is trumpet 7 in Revelation at chapter 11. How could this be any clearer? Sometimes the best explanation is what is right before your eyes, out of the mouth of Jesus and John and Paul, and not off of some graph or chart or map drawn by men who have been arguing over these matters for years. As I said in the beginning, I am sticking with what Jesus said. I make no apology for my position in this matter. That having been said, millions around the world believe that at least some of the trumpet prophecies have direct correlations to relatively modern historical events. My book, Final Warning, Understanding the Trumpet Days of Revelation, documents these claims using university sources, language expert sources, United Nations documents, mainstream media sources, scientific journals, National Geographic and renowned commentary sources, and many other sources of such nature. So if you care to see what millions of others think that they see in these matters, get a copy of my book, Final Warning, Understanding the Trumpet Days of Revelation. It might just rock your world and your current view of eschatology. Hey, thanks for listening, and God bless. And Maranatha, even so, Lord Jesus, come.